All right, Bree.
Mm-hmm.
Bree, where are you from originally? Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in a town called Boonton in New Jersey.
And what was your childhood like? Do you have both your parents?
Yeah, I have both my parents. We moved from, I was born in Florida, but we moved when I was a month old to a town called Irvington. And I had my first sibling born when I was 6, my sister, and then a brother 2 years later. We had a really good childhood.
Everything was good?
Mm-hmm.
And where did your life go after you left home?
Well, I ended up here. I actually, my husband passed away 2.5 years ago.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and so I went to detox when I was in New Jersey, and I did that for a week, and then I actually flew right out here to go to rehab in Pasadena. I was supposed to be there for a year, but when the fog kind of lifted, and I realized exactly what was going on, I left the rehab after 3 days. I chose to come to the one in California, hoping it would deter me from leaving, because I knew I'd have bad days, and I don't know anyone out here. But I guess it didn't. I left. I was just too much anxiety, too much going on at once. I had just lost my youngest son.
You lost your son?
Yeah, I have 4 boys, but the last one, I was on heroin when I found out I was pregnant with him. So I looked into rehabs, and they got me in a 90-day program. And then when I was about to graduate, I still didn't feel comfortable not being in an environment like that. So they found a mommy in me. It's where you can have your baby there and keep the baby with you. And I was just about to graduate, and I had a warrant for an old fine. When I checked into probation, it was the week before my son's first birthday. So I had been with him that whole year, but he got put in foster care because I had to go to jail, and I lost the bed at the Mommy and Me. They were gonna give me housing and stuff, pay for the mortgage for 5 years. And I lost that, I lost everything, and they said they could only hold my bed for 3 days. I ended up being in jail for 11, so I lost my bed. When I talked to DIFUS, that's the Child Protective Services in New Jersey, asked how where I go to pick my son up, and they were asking where was I living. Now at this point, I was kind of drifting. I wasn't allowed back home at that point. I was living with my dad. My mom and dad separated when I was about 21. So my mom moved to Florida, my dad stayed in Jersey. I stayed with my dad, but he put up with a lot for many years, so yeah, he just couldn't do it anymore. And him and my sister are taking care of my 3 boys. So I didn't really have anywhere to bring the baby to, and they opened a case against me anyway for neglect. And I was like, I don't understand. I never neglected him. He's with me 24/7. And he said, well, in the state of New Jersey, it's considered neglect if you go to jail and have nowhere to put your son. So they're going to start a case against me. I just had previously gotten my case closed with my first 3 kids. They allowed me to keep custody after almost 4 years of fighting in court, because I would have a relapse every so often, and then it's I'd have to start all over, new counseling and parenting classes, and it was just every time you'd complete something, they'd want you to do something else, and it was really, really rough. But luckily, my dad helped me a lot, brought me to appointments and stuff like that. So as long as I agreed to give up 50% of my custody to my dad, me and him would split it. So they said if God forbid I did have a relapse or anything were to happen to me, at least everything would be okay, if they were with my dad. So I agreed to that, but it was just so draining, those almost 4 years. So I knew I couldn't do it on my own, because my dad wasn't going to go through it again. So I just gave the baby up at that point.
And the baby, where is he now?
don't know. He went up for adoption. My sister actually knows where he is though, because somehow it was a closed adoption and I wasn't supposed to know anything about it, but somehow the family reached out to my sister and she goes and sees him for his birthdays. He just turned 4.
And your other 3 boys are where?
My oldest son, he's in the Marines. He's 20. And my middle 2, my sister recently bought a house. She was living with my dad. They're all living together. My dad's got a really big house. But my sister bought her own house and moved the 2 younger boys in with her. So.
Do you talk to your boys?
Once in a blue. I could call them every day if I wanted, but they're older now. And I just don't have anything good to say. I know it really hurt them when I left the rehab because they were all so proud of me for going, but I hate calling them. Like, I want to call them. I want to talk to them all the time. But it was always the same thing. When are you coming home? And I just hate it. Like, I never know what to tell them. And they always just tell me, like, we're praying for you. And they're older now, so, I mean, they sound so strong, but I know, like, we were so close. I was with them always for the first, like, basically 15 or 16 years. And it went from that to just not seeing them at all. The last day I saw them was 2.5 years ago at the airport. They came with me to say goodbye.
And how long have you been down here in Skid Row?
2.5 years.
And you're living in a tent?
No, I'm staying with a friend right now. I'm just kind of like drifting place to place, so I don't really get along with the guy I'm staying with too much. Like, I haven't been home in like 3 days just because I can't stand fighting all the time. So I've just been a week walking around and just passing out wherever I sit.
And what are you doing for money now?
Prostituting.
How much money will you make in a night?
Not a lot. It's, I mean, like, for like a blowjob, I asked for like 30 and like 50 for sex, but I stopped having sex just because I've had so many surgeries recently on my knee. It's like, it just irritates it. And I didn't really like doing it anyway. I don't get much more money to do it, so. I have people tell me all the time, because I'll tell them like how much I hate it, and like, you should find another profession or something because you hate it that much. And I'm like, I don't really know any of the girls really that don't hate it. I mean, you gotta pretend like you're all right with it, because who wants, nobody wants to sit there with some uptight girls like complaining about everything she has to do, but I despise it. It's just, I've tried working and I just can't pull off, 8 hours and then waiting 2 weeks for a paycheck. Like, it just doesn't work. But this is like, if I get dope sick, I go out and I can get, 30 or 40, however much money in like 10, 20 minutes and, get paid immediately and work at what times I want, when I want, how much I want. It's quick and it's not easy, but like mentally, I guess it's not easy. But I'm so used to it at this point, it doesn't really bother me. Like, if I sit there and actually think about it, yeah, it bothers me, but it's just the easiest thing I could do.
What is your drug?
Heroin.
When did you start using heroin?
I think it was about 25.
Who introduced you to that?
My old best friend. She'd been doing it for about 10 years, and every so often she'd like beg me to get high with her, and I didn't know much about it. I lived a really sheltered life. My parents really were protective of me, but I just knew better. There was nothing good that could come out of that, but I suffered from really bad anxiety and depression, and I actually started taking pills, Xanax, and like Percocets or any kind of pain medicine. And out of nowhere, my doctor one day when I came in for my refills just cut me off. Like that day, he didn't even give me one more refill. I guess he was kind of getting in trouble for writing too many scripts for narcotics. Because I'd tried a bunch of other drugs before heroin, and it never really did much for me. I could take it or leave it. Like I'd do cocaine when I was younger, if we were clubbing, and that was it. It would just be a night of fun, and I'd leave it alone for months or however long. So I just thought it'd be like the same thing. If I was just really going through it, I'd just, do a few bags of heroin and stop. And it worked like that for maybe 6 months. Like I was just doing it here and there. And then her husband showed me how to, I was sniffing it in New Jersey. It's all powder form. And just my nose was starting to get irritated and like stuffy all the time. I started to get like a little scab. And I just watched him shooting it up, and it just looked so much better. Like, it would take a little while to hit you when you sniff it. And when I'd watch him shoot up, he was instantly nodding out. So he actually shot me up for the first time. I remember it was like New Year's Eve. And that was it. It was like over after that. I was doing it every day. And I started stealing from stores to support my habit. And that worked out for about, I'd say a good almost 2 years. And I hiding it from my family. But I picked my kids up from school every day, and I got arrested for the first time, like a little over 2 years into doing it, for stealing. I think it was a Walmart, and it was cutting it kind of close to the time the kids had to be picked up. I only had like another 2 hours or something like that. So I called my dad from the police station, and I just immediately like started crying, and I told him I was in jail. And he's very like calm and laid back, and he's just like, "Oh man, what'd you do?" And I told him I was stealing, and he was like, "Stealing? Like, for what?" Because at the time I was babysitting a little girl, so I made I think like $120 a day watching her, and then plus I had a boyfriend at the time. He was working, and I think he got about $400 or $500 a week, and all his check he'd basically give to me, and then I'd hit up my dad for money all the time if we ran out. So he didn't understand, like, why are you stealing? Like, you have plenty of money, or if you needed money that bad, you could have just called me. But I'd been really hitting them up like hard lately, and it was kind of like, where's all this money going? Or what are you doing? And I'd just come up with some excuse. So I told him, like, I would have asked you, but you've been saying no lately, so I don't want to bother you anymore. So I was just like stealing like electronics and selling it to a place that buys that stuff.
So what does heroin do for you?
No, I used to say it takes away my depression, but now it just kind of feels good and stops me from being sick. I feel like it does help with the depression still, but when it comes to like thinking about my kids, it doesn't take that away. I'm like miserable all the time, and I'm trying to get myself to go back to rehab because my kids are getting older now. The other two are 13 and 15. And, oh no, I'm sorry, the middle one turned 16. And, Tony, the littler one, his birthday's in April. He'll be 14. I want to get clean so bad because the more time that passes, this life here has become the new normal for me. I feel out of place and weird when I'm around just average people, whereas this type of setting used to like terrify me and make me sick to my stomach, like feel so sad for the people walking down the street. Like I used to drive to get my drugs when I was in New Jersey, and it was a really bad part of town, and I wouldn't even get out of my car in those days. I was scared. The guy would come to the car and I'd just crack it open just a bit and then be right out of there. But it was like a few years later, I was just down there walking around, hanging out like it was nothing. And that felt okay to me. And like now, like just going home for a day, the day I was leaving for California, like I just felt so weird, like being in my dad's house again and seeing my kids. Every time I'd see them, it's just once in a blue. And I would just hug both of them. Like, just hold them both of you. And I wouldn't let them go. And they'd just both be like, okay, Mom. And like my oldest son at that point, he'd just kind of be in his room. He'd say hi and like, we were so close that I know it hurts him so bad, and he puts up to this front like he's not hurting, but I know he is. He doesn't even want to talk to me anymore. I called him last year on his birthday just to say happy birthday, and you know, he sounded all happy when he answered, like, hey, hello, and I hear all his friends in the background. I said, hey, it's Mom, and then click. So I said, hey, it's Mom, I just want to say happy birthday. And he didn't say anything, he just hung up. That was the last time I heard his voice. The other two are much more understanding, but I think that's also just because they don't know as much. You know, they were younger when all this was going on, and my oldest son was figuring it all out, and plus his dad would tell him stuff, and he knew way too much, and it hurt him. But he was such a good kid. I remember I was sitting in his room on his bed one day when I was wanting to get high so bad, but I was trying to stay clean, and I was just crying and crying. And he came home from school and he saw me. And he didn't even say anything. He just ran over to me. And he just hugged me so tight. And he was rubbing my head. And he was like, it's okay, Mom, you're gonna be okay. It's like he didn't even know I was crying, why I was crying, but he knew. Like, he just looked at me and he knew it. And he's such a sweet kid and so sensitive. And he just hugged me so tight and he was just crying. Just because I was crying. I miss that so bad.
Is this the lowest point in your life right now?
Yeah. It bothers me so much that, like I was saying, I'm still going through like terrible feelings and depression, even though I'm getting high. So I'm trying to just keep telling myself that. It's like, well, I guess if I'm gonna be miserable either way, why can't I just go home and be miserable? I'm terrified of the thought of getting clean and having those feelings again, just like a deep like emptiness. and, you know, just being in bed all the time and crying, and it scares me. But I'm like, what's worse, like that or this? Like, I'm still crying all the time, and this is just since coming to California. Like, before that, you know, I'd be away from the kids on and off, and I was sad without them, of course, but it coming out here, it was like just real that I was not with them anymore. And it felt like permanent, and I just became really even more depressed about that. And it's just sad, because when I was back home, like, there was really nothing to be depressed about at all. I had a great life. Anything I needed, I got, and you know, I had it all, like anything anybody could want. But it didn't matter. I was just sad. I just was clinically depressed, you know, just, I guess, a chemical imbalance. And I tried different depression meds and different combinations they give me. But I never felt like it was a pill, really, that was going to fix me. Like, I needed to, like, make some type of change, like lifestyle change or something. So I'm just keep trying to tell myself that, like, you know, what are you doing? Your kids are getting older and older. I'm getting older. It's just all this time's being wasted for what? And I know it's killing them. They put on their little brave face or whatever, but you know, they don't have their dads. They have two different dads. Neither of them really have their dads. And I was kind of all they had, and I felt like we were just unusually close, just like a bond. So I don't know, like, up until I left, pretty much, they were still taking turns, like, sleeping in my bed, and there'd be nights I'd wake up and there'd be one on the bed and like two on the floor, because they just wanted to be around me always. And I remember when I started being gone more, my youngest one, Tony, like, I could tell he was starting to feel something wasn't right, even though he was pretty young. And when I'd go to leave, he would look so sad, and he'd be like, you're coming back, right? And I don't know why, like, I guess he just sensed that I was pulling away, but it just kills me, and I hurt everybody so bad. I just want to make them all proud, and that's why I don't ever call, because I want to be able to call from a rehab or from some good place. I want to be able to call and finally say when I'm coming home. I just hate calling with the same old nonsense, like, yeah, still out here, still doing nothing. And I try to pretend like I'm not getting high, but obviously everybody knows better. I wouldn't be gone if I weren't getting high. But I try to play it off, like, to my dad, like, he doesn't know I live on Skid Row, and I pretend like I live in a nice apartment and have a nice job, just because he worries so much. I'm sure he probably knows I'm lying, but I don't, he gets worried, and I don't want him to know that, like, what a bad actual situation I'm in.
Thank you so much for talking with me, Bree.
No problem.
Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you.